BBC News presenter Martine Croxall is understood to be amongst those leading calls for strike action over the corporation's redundancy plans. Nearly 80 BBC journalists have written to National Union of Journalists, NUJ, General Secretary Laura Davison demanding a ballot on industrial action. The letter, which also includes signatures from presenters Samira Ahmed and Kasim Adera, follows news that 5 experienced BBC journalists face compulsory redundancy, Deadline reports. These staff members have more than a century of combined experience at the broadcaster. Additional compulsory redundancies are reportedly planned for Asian Network News. The journalists' letter questions why the NUJ has not initiated a strike ballot, despite the union's established policy of balloting BBC members whenever any colleague faces compulsory redundancy. News presenter Croxall, who made headlines earlier this week when she corrected a news report from pregnant people to women during a live broadcast, is among those supporting strike action. Compulsory redundancy was always a red line for the NUJ. Why has that changed, and since when? The letter asked. The journalists expressed alarm that the fundamental principle of opposing compulsory redundancy, is not being upheld. The signatories, many of whom have been NUJ members for decades, are questioning the union's apparent shift in approach. The NUJ's long-standing policy requires a ballot of BBC union members for strike action whenever any member faces compulsory redundancy. Despite this policy, no ballot has been issued for those affected by the current round of cuts. The NUJ has been approached for comment about the letter and the union's position on the redundancies by GB News. The affected journalists face departure by mid-August, with the BBC stating that redeployment is not an option. "We are running out of time," the BBC employees wrote in their letter to the union. However, those at risk of redundancy dispute the corporation's stance on redeployment. They argue that suitable alternative roles are being advertised on the BBC's internal jobs board. 4 senior BBC journalists have lodged age discrimination complaints as part of the redundancy dispute. All are over 50 years old and have raised internal complaints as a first step towards pursuing an employment tribunal against the BBC. The redundancies form part of wider cost-cutting measures announced by BBC News last October, which included plans to cut 130 roles. The division said it would need to cancel interview series Hard Talk as part of BBC-wide efforts to save £700 million. BBC News CEO Deborah Turnus acknowledged at the time that the changes were not easy. A BBC News spokesperson told the People's Channel, "Like all parts of the BBC, News needs to contribute to the savings announced last year. While we do not comment on individual staff issues, restructuring in BBC News is taking place according to established BBC policies. We conduct all processes in a thorough and fair manner. We are committed to supporting our staff throughout, including through comprehensive redeployment assistance."